Hi travelers! Today we are at Fort Ticonderoga, formerly known as Fort Carillon, in Ticonderoga, New York. And no, this is not where they make the pencils. According to Fort Ticonderoga's official park website, this is the largest series of untouched Revolutionary War earthworks in America. The footage you're seeing here was taken during my first and only ever trip to Fort Ticonderoga, and this is where we got to speak to some of the locals and the staff about the history of the fort. This star-shaped fort was built in the 1750s by the French during the French and Indian War. The fort was used again during the American Revolutionary War, and the placement of the fort between Lake Champlain and Lake George was not accidental. This was a strategy to control trade routes from the British. At the time, the French called this Fort Carillon, presumably named after a French military leader, and the star shape was based on designs from a French military engineer, which allowed them to have defensive walls at various angles facing both towards and away from the lake. In 1758, the British drove the French from the fort during the Battle of Carillon, and was then controlled by the British into the Revolutionary War, until it was captured by the Green Mountain Boys. Over the next several years, the fort was occupied back and forth between the British and the Americans. In fact, the capture of Fort Ticonderoga during the Revolutionary War was the first offensive victory for the Americans. In the late 1770s and early 1780s, the British finally abandoned both Fort Ticonderoga and nearby Fort Crown Point, destroying much of both in the process. After this abandonment, locals used materials they found at the fort as building materials. Currently, the fort at Ticonderoga is designated as a National Historic Landmark and is open May through October for visitors. The staff portray various characters from the Revolutionary War and provide detailed information about the attacks on the fort, as well as the jobs they performed to keep the fort running. Across Lake Champlain, you can also visit Mount Defiance and get a great aerial view of Fort Ticonderoga. If you enjoyed this video, you may enjoy the previous video I made about Fort Foster in Kittery, Maine. I'll leave a link to that on the screen and in the description so you can watch that right now.